Hey everybody, happy September, baby! Yes, I love the fall. It's the best time of the year. A new month means no Remember the Game this week, as I'm sticking with my plan to skip the first Wednesday of every month to catch up on my backlog a little bit. And to be honest, we moved this past weekend, and I've been so busy I haven't played a fucking thing, so I don't have anything to talk about. But to make sure you get your fix of my annoying voice between now and next week's episode, I'm raiding our Patreon archives for another freebie. We do a lot of console retrospectives over on Expansion Pass, where we just talk about the legacy of our favorite retro systems. And for my money, legacies don't get any leggier than when it comes to the NES. So this episode is dedicated to that little gray box of joy. It's Expansion Pass number 208, and it originally released for Patreons back in April of 2024. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of these, subscriptions start at just $3 a month at patreon.com/rememberthegame. There are hundreds and hundreds of episodes over there waiting for you, ad-free. And if you want to see how Patreon works, we actually have more freebies waiting for you over there as well. You can sign up for Patreon for free, see how it works, check out the previews of episodes, all kinds of cool stuff. So patreon.com/rememberthegame if you want to see more of these. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We'll be back next week, and I hope you enjoyed this free episode of Expansion Pass. Let's go. All right, I better fade that out, because if I don't, Nintendo is going to be all up in my business. But if you need to know what that song is for or is from, then you probably shouldn't be listening to this episode or this show, quite frankly. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 208th edition of Remember the Game Expansion Pass. It is one of our Patreon-exclusive weekly podcasts here at Remember the Game Industries. My name is Adam Blank, and if you're hearing this, watching this, or checking this out live on a stream, you support us on the old Patreon box, and if that is the case, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it. I am still a little bit messed up on these pills, like I was on the Rambling Idiot on Tuesday. I recorded Monday, but we'll have Tuesday. But I'm mostly better now. So if I seem a little bit goobly-gobbly, it's because I am a little bit goobly-gobbly, but I'm mostly okay. Feeling good. I'm super fucking excited about this episode. I hope you're well. This week, we are righting a wrong that is so wrong, I should probably be exiled to Monster Island, which fortunately is just a name. It's actually a peninsula. Shout out to anyone that gets that reference. It's one of my favorite jokes. We are dedicating an episode of Expansion Pass to the legendary Andre the Giant levels of legendary Nintendo Entertainment System. This is where this whole gaming / podcasting journey started for me, and I'm sure many of you as well. And if I'm being honest, the only reason it took 208 episodes to get to an episode where we looked back on the NES was because I didn't realize we hadn't already done it. I could have swore there was already an episode in the archives about the NES. And that's starting to happen a lot more these days because we've got so many episodes of all the different shows we've done. People ask, like, hey, have you ever covered this topic or that game? And I regularly have to check myself now because I can't remember what all we've done. So I went back and looked, And in the previous 207 expansion passes, we have done these types of episodes about the original Xbox, the PS1, the Game Boy, the Nintendo 64, the GameCube, the Dreamcast, and the Wii U. But never the NES or the Super Nintendo or Genesis, for that matter. My God. So I need to right those wrongs. That is on me. I didn't realize we had punched this card, so let's get punching. I am going to share my villain origin story with the NES. I'll talk about my memories, thoughts on its legacy, all that good stuff. I'll read some of your 100 or so comments as well. We had a lot, so as always, I can't read all of them, but I'll sneak some of them in. And it just seems very fitting to say we'll blow in the cartridge in a moment because, as you know, part of your Patreon perk is a peek past the podcast. So if you want to hold the reset button, give your little brother the broken controller, and set your TV to channel 3, we'll talk about what's been going on around here in the last week or so. I know some of you are going to write in and be like, I set my TV to channel 4. You people are weird. Channel 3, you can't channel 4. That doesn't sound right. Channel 3 is where you said it. I don't have too much to show you guys behind the scenes here. It's been a busy week, lots of stand-up comedy. I actually have to leave for a gig in about 3 hours right now, so I got to get this done, edited and uploaded, and then brave the fucking... We were just talking on Remember the Game about how winter is over, and then last night we got fucking a bunch of snow and rain and wind, and now the highways are shit and I need to drive on them tonight. So about 3 hours from now, I'm leaving for a gig. I'm getting my ducks in a row for the Calgary Expo next weekend. I know you're probably sick of hearing about it, but if you're in Calgary next weekend and you're at the Expo, swing by and say hi. It'd be nice to see you. I want to apologize for the lack of Twitch streams. I know I haven't been on. I've been trying so hard to be more consistent with that and get on there more often. But on weeks like these and last week, it just unfortunately gets bumped down the pecking order. Speaking of pecking, I hear some of you asking for more Let's Plays over on YouTube as well. I hear you. I have some on my hard drive. I just have to edit them, and I just haven't had time. Like, honestly, no complaints. This job is my fucking dream job. I'm living my best life. But I was thinking about it today, and like, I would be willing to bet you 80+% of my life that isn't spent eating, sleeping, or going to the bathroom is spent working on Remember the Game or comedy. It's very, very rare that I'm not. So if it hasn't gotten done, it's just stuck in the to-do pile. So I apologize for that. Speaking of the to-do pile, Golden Sun is finally done. We covered it. The episode is out. Huzzah. So I'm 2 Patreon poll winners behind, and that is Beautiful Joe and X-Men 2 The Clone Wars. So the plan for Remember the Game for the next month or so, if you haven't seen my posts, next week we're going to cover Spy vs. Spy for the NES, and the reason for that is because I grew up playing that game. I fucking love that game, and that buys me a couple of weeks to get caught up on the backlog, because it's Spy vs. Spy for $2.94, and then $2.95 will be a revisited episode about The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and then I'm hoping $2.96 and $2.97 are Beautiful Joe and X-Men 2. And that means the only games that I'll have on my backlog will be whatever wins this week's Patreon poll, which is live by the time you're hearing this, the Nintendo 64 edition, and Mass Effect 3, which is the game that one of the 2 high bidders for our auction during my 24-hour stream last year wanted to cover, and that one probably isn't coming until later on this summer. That is a big fucking game. Yeah, so good. Some of you have been asking about a Fallout episode, with Fallout being so topical right now, the TV show and everything. 1,000,000,000% I'm going to review the show, the Fallout series. We're watching it right now. So far, I'm only 2 episodes in. So far, it's been very, very good. So we'll be reviewing that. I would guess probably on Expansion Pass 210 on May 2nd. I would guess that's when we'll review the first season of Fallout. And I'd love to review Fallout 3 or maybe even New Vegas on Remember the Game, but I need time to replay them, and those are big, right? I got to finish Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which I will cover in May on Expansion Pass for sure. I still really want to go back and finish Cyberpunk 2077, but I hear ya. I am jonesing to play some Fallout after watching a couple episodes of the show, so I might casually start a playthrough of Fallout 3 in the next couple of weeks and just chip away at it, and hopefully by the end of the year I'm done it and I can't guarantee when it'll go live, but I'll probably start it the next few weeks and throw it up there for a review. I think that's everything. I don't think just quickly a quick note, and I'll remind you more next week. We're going to be recording Game Patch a day early next week, Wednesday afternoon / Wednesday evening, because I'm leaving Thursday morning for the Calgary Expo. So if any big news breaks on Thursday, I won't have it until the week after, but the show will still go live on time and stuff. It'll just be a day short of news, okay? Good enough. Let's talk the NES. That's why you're here. I'm going to cue up some more classic NES music. There it is. And when it stops, we'll go back to the 80s and talk about the NES. What a time to be alive. Let's fucking go. And if you don't know what that is from, get some fucking culture. That's a little Mega Man magic right there. Oh, God, Mega Man music is always so good. You're going to hear about some Mega Man in the next 45 minutes or so. I'm sure you all expected that coming in. I have to say, as we kick this off to look back at the NES, I have to say, I could not get to all of them, or even close to getting all of your comments in, which y'all should be used to hearing by now. Frankly, we had about 100 comments, and I would guess like 70-80% of them were just people sharing memories of like what a great time to be, growing up with the NES, or like, when you got introduced to the NES and that kind of stuff. Well, I can't read all of them on the show. Reading their comments this morning was fucking awesome. And I mean that. Like, I sat here this morning working on my notes, and I was just drinking my coffee and just reading through your comments, and I really just enjoyed reading everybody else's memories of this fucking system. Like, there's not another console in video games that can trigger the nostalgic response that the NES does. I know some of you grew up with the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, maybe old Atari, maybe the Game Boy. Some of you youngins grew up with like the PS2 or the PS1 or whatever the fuck. I get it. I get everybody's got a system they grew up with, but maybe it's just because I'm biased because I grew up with the NES, but I just don't think there's a console more synonymous with retro gaming and that nostalgic feeling than the original Nintendo Entertainment System. I can't believe we took so long to do this. All right, kids, gather around the lemon tree. An old man's talking. Let me take you back to 1985. Well, okay, maybe not 1985. That is when the Nintendo Entertainment System released here in North America. I don't remember when we actually got ours. I was born in 83, but I'm fairly confident I wasn't playing it in 1985. That said, like, I don't remember a time in my life where we didn't have at least one video game system in the house, and it started with the NES. Like, I genuinely can't remember that far back. And some of my earliest memories are playing Super Mario Brothers. Seriously, like, I'm sure everyone listening to this, you have like that one earliest memory. And my earliest memory is fishing with my dad. But other than that, it genuinely is playing Super Mario Brothers. That music, seeing that title screen on this, like sucking at it, but just that blocky brown Mario running across that screen with the controller, and just I burned into my brain. That is my earliest memory, and I say it, and I don't. It's not an exaggeration. Like, this podcast, this hobby for me, none of this probably exists without Super Mario Brothers and the NES. That is my villain origin story. It's funny too. One of my earliest memories of playing the NES is playing it with my younger brother Josh. And if by some fluke you've never played the original Super Mario Brothers 2 player, it's not like Super Mario Brothers 3 or Super Mario World where you take turns. I play a level, then you play a level, then I play. It's the first player plays until they die. And even as a kid, I could usually get to about somewhere in World 4. If I wasn't using warp pipes, I could get to somewhere in World 4 before I'd have my first death. And so my brother would have to wait, 15 minutes or so for me to get to World 4. And then I'd usually die. And then he'd finally get his turn. He's back at level 1-1 as Luigi. And I was infamous for reaching over and hitting his hand or unplugging his controller or knocking it out of his hand so that he would die many a time by that first Goomba's hand. And then it would be my turn again. And then he'd go crying to mom, and then I'd get kicked off the Nintendo. And in hindsight, it was like, I don't know why we ever played with each other, because we knew it was going to turn into a fight. I don't know why we just were like, all right, I'm going to play for an hour, then you play for an hour. I don't know why we ever tried to do multiplayer with each other, but good fucking times. That is some of my earliest memories. I have a smile on my face. Like, this episode is just going to be nostalgia right out the back door. Oh my God. And I think it all starts with that Mario Brothers Duck Hunt cartridge. That one that so many of us have, that for some reason now people seem to want to go on buy and sell sites and stuff and be like, I know what I have, $50 for their Mario Luigi or for their Mario Brothers Donkey or Duck Hunt cartridge, and it's just not fucking worth it, you dumbasses. But that's where it all starts. That black cartridge with the dual screen, nothing fancy. You plug it in, you turn it on, and if it works, literally just those two, it just has Mario Brothers with Mario running beside it, and then Duck Hunt underneath, and you just pick one and fuck, good times. Robert wrote into the show and said, I was 6 years old when I got my NES, and I got Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt on the same cartridge. I could not read English. I am from Sweden. So when I started it, I could only start Duck Hunt for the first week because I plugged the cool orange zapper instead of a controller in. So one day I started with a controller instead, and Super Mario came on. I screamed to my mom and dad that another game came on, and after that, Mario became my number one guy in gaming forever. That's pure. I guarantee you, so many of you, this is where you started. Like that iconic, you just heard the music, that iconic do-do-do-do-do-do. And that Goomba walking across the screen. Duck Hunt's fine. We all played Duck Hunt. Most of us, you tried for an hour or for about 10 minutes. Not an hour. You tried for like 10 minutes. Then you put the gun on the screen for 10 minutes. Then you're like, fuck this. And you went back to Mario Brothers. But so many of us probably started with that cartridge. I have to say, like, the reason the logo for Remember the Game is that original Super Mario Brothers title screen. I don't know if you'll ever hear me call myself a genius on this show again, and I don't know if you've ever heard it before, but that logo was genius, and that all started, I had no idea that logo would be such a big part of why Remember the Game would reach the levels of success that it has. I just did it because I'm like, literally, there is no game more Remember the Game, that nostalgia for me, than Super Mario Brothers, and that initial title screen from Super Mario Brothers is that, like, to the 20th degree to me. So that's the only reason I made that logo, is because I was like, that to me is what it is. And then it just turned out that a lot of people I've heard over the years tell me they decided to give Remember the Game a shot because of that logo. That screen caught their eye. Everybody knows that fucking screen, man. Good times. This is an ad by BetterHelp. A band once said, "Work sucks, I know." And I think most people agree with them. Workplace stress is now one of the top causes of declining mental health, with 61% of the global workforce experiencing higher than normal levels of stress from their jobs. And while walking away from your job might not be an option, taking a little time every day to focus on yourself and your mental health can make a huge difference. I know in the summer I try to get outside every day, get a little bit of sun, and just enjoy the outdoors. It really helps. At least until my allergies attack, and then it's ugly. It's important to take steps to combat work stress, and therapy can be a huge one. It's not just for overcoming trauma. Therapy can help you define work goals, set some work boundaries, develop coping skills. It's like a cheat code for life. And if you're thinking, man, I'm too busy for therapy, well, look into BetterHelp. They make therapy as convenient as possible. You can meet with one of their over 30,000 therapists online and on your schedule, just like over 5 million people around the world already have done. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/RememberTheGame. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/RememberTheGame. We've had some great partners over the years here at Remember the Game, but I don't know if any of them have hit home for me quite like Hometown Hero does. No pun intended. Don't start. It's a transparent, honest cannabis company that helps people and gives back to those that have served their country at the same time. I mean, come on. As soon as I read about these guys, I knew I wanted to work with them. Hometown Hero is a cannabis company out of Austin, Texas, and they were founded back in 2015 by a U.S. veteran. They have two goals: create premium hemp products that can help everyone, and to support veterans by donating a portion of those profits to organizations set up to take care of those who have served. Hometown Hero products are of the highest quality, and everything they offer is made right there in the U.S. of A. Gummies, caramels, chocolates, drink mix. There's something for everyone. And what's more, their hemp is grown locally in Texas, which is something they should and do take a lot of pride in. And they offer certificates of analysis for everything they sell, because they want to be clear that their products are as advertised, both in terms of potency and ingredients. No contaminants, you get what you pay for. Just how they conduct business is enough to get my good eyes' attention. But when you circle back to the fact that the company was founded by a veteran and they put such heavy emphasis on supporting veterans, this isn't just lip service. I'm not reading a script I was given here. I'm proud to have Hometown Hero associated with Remember the Game. Reclaim your evening. Visit hometownhero.com and use code RTG to take 20% off your first purchase. That's hometownhero.com, code RTG for 20% off your first purchase. I was going to read another comment, but just the next thing I had written in my notes was going back to that point with Josh and knocking my little brother and knocking his controller out of his hand so I could play again. We used to fight so much over who got to play. In hindsight, maybe that's why we play Super Mario Brothers 2-player, because we would both fight over whose turn it was to play. So my mom was like, well, then play together. So then we would play, and we didn't have a lot of games going on, which I'll get to later. So unless we'd rented a game, usually we were playing Super Mario Brothers, and then that was like the only way to play it 2-player was to take those turns. But we used to always fight over who got to play, and then sometimes my mom would set a rule in that, like, she tried setting the rule of you could play until you game over, and then it's the other person's turn. So I could play whatever game I want, but once I get game over, then I have to give the controller to my little brother. So then I would always try to pick games that would go on the longest, or games where I couldn't game over, or that would take forever to game over. just so that my brother didn't get a chance to play. So then they realized that that wasn't an option. So then, plus my brother wasn't as good as I was. So then, I'll be honest, he wasn't. He probably is better than me at a lot of games now, but he wasn't back then. And so that was the other problem, is I would get an hour or two in, and then my brother would get like 5 minutes. So then they were like, all right, let's get away with that. So then they just started being like, okay, Adam gets the Nintendo for 2 hours, then Josh gets the Nintendo for 2 hours. And we always would fight over that kind of stuff. And then you would think, well, once you got a Super Nintendo, that must have solved it. But it didn't, because we had them all hooked up in our basement on our old TV, because my mom and dad didn't want them in the living room, so they were still on the same TV, so we still fight about it all the time. Good times, man. Some of our funnest fights over who got to play the NES. Fuck me. Matt Locke said, I love that handle. Matt Locke said, absolutely loved the NES. My first video game system and experience. My family was lower middle class, so we only had the NES for many years, well into the 16-bit era, but I always just preferred NES to newer games. I remember my mom giving me a hard time after we got our Nintendo 64, asking me why I was still playing that old original Nintendo, when she just paid hundreds of dollars to get us the newest system. So many great memories with this thing, from playing Super Mario Bros. 3 with my dad, to playing Rygar at my grandparents' house. My older brother and I said we had to leave soon, only for my younger brother to slip in the bathroom and bust his head open. So forcing my parents to take him to the hospital, and my older brother and I being so excited that we got more time to play. Nothing better than more time to play. I know, like, I'm not trying to make it out like my parents were alcoholics, because they didn't drink that. I don't remember my parents partying that much. But every once in a while, they'd have like people over, and they'd be playing cards or whatever the fuck. And those are some of my favorite nights, because, yeah, we'd be able to stay up late and just keep playing Nintendo. Anytime you got more time to, like, I'm telling you, I know some of you that grew up with these other systems, Super Nintendo, fucking PS2, whatever the fuck. Like, I'm sure you have just as much nostalgia for it as we do with the NES, but like, gaming was so new to the mainstream back then, and it was religion. It was religion to so many of us. The more time you could spend with the NES, the better. It was my first love. I just wanted to be around her all the time with the NES. Oh my God. Like, we don't do history lessons on this show very often, but the NES saved gaming after the crash back in the Atari and all that, ColecoVision in that era and everything, which I was not around for. And none of my friends or family played Atari or ColecoVision or anything that I know of. The NES was basically like, I guess it's kind of a pun, but the NES was like pushing reset for video games and just taking us back to the start and just making them cool again. And it was just, God, what a special system. And ever since I was a kid, that was just all I wanted to do. Like, I'd go outside and play, and I'd read, and I like to watch cartoons, and I'd watch some movies, but that's why I haven't seen so many of these movies from the 80s and the 90s that everyone always yells at me for. Like, you've never seen insert that movie here. It's because if I had spare time, I can almost guarantee you I was playing Nintendo. Like, and to this day, that hobby has continued, like, or that habit has continued. It's just, if I have an opening in my schedule where I don't have anything going on, very, very rarely is my thought like, well, do I want to do this or do this or do this? Like, it's second nature. It's just instinct that I want to go back to just playing video games. Like, and that goes back to the NES. It all started there. That was, if I had 10 minutes, I'm like, well, I'll fire up Mario and see how far I can get in 10 minutes. Like, it didn't matter. I used to try to sneak up and quit sessions before school, before my mom finally said no, because I would almost miss the bus, because I would be playing Nintendo and refusing to turn it off, and then she would turn it off and we'd get in fights, or else I would do the thing where I'd left it on and tried to cover up the red light, and she would catch me there and I'd get in trouble. So she finally took it away. But it was like a drug. It was like a drug. I'm like, anything I can do to get 5 minutes of Nintendo time. It's for all of you that watch The Simpsons, that scene with the babysitter, and she's got the cartridge. What cartridge is it? I don't remember, but whatever. She's got like an NES cartridge, and she's like, see, Lisa, boys aren't hard to control. They all follow their video game cartridges. And she's like waving in front of Bart, and Bart runs into the wall trying to get his hands on that. That was me that scene speaks to me. That's what I was like as a kid. And it just never really changed, man. My God. John Truckosaurus says, I was born in the early 80s, so I was in elementary school when Nintendo took over the world. Just to interrupt John's comment, like, they really did take over the world. It was fucking insane. John continues, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so I got my Nintendo a couple years after it initially launched. But that Christmas morning, when I finally got one, felt like winning the Super Bowl. Such great memories sitting on the floor with my brother in front of the TV playing Super Mario Brothers. The nostalgia I feel for that era of gaming cannot be topped. The NES will always be my favorite system. It introduced an entire generation of kids to the magic of home consoles. It really did. And like, notice how like everyone that's writing in is bringing up their memories of playing Super Mario Brothers. Like, it really was just like I don't know if I can even think of like a comparison. It's just everybody did it. Everyone's doing it. And I know it's a cliche, but everybody was. It was such a big deal. We didn't have a ton of games. Like I said, we had Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt because that came with it. A few we had a bunch of crappy games. I think, and I'm not insulting her because my mom and dad did the best thing. My mom and dad, we never wanted for anything. My mom and dad did a good job with us. But I think, by and large, what my parents used to do when they would get us a new Nintendo game is they would buy whatever was like on sale. Like they'd go to the store and if that was in the discount bin or if that was on sale, that's what they would buy us. We had so many games that we never asked for. Yo Noid was one. RC Pro-Am was one. Bart versus the Space Mutants, I'm sure I got because I'm my love for The Simpsons, and we've talked about that ad nauseum. I know that game sucks, but I adore that fucking game. Yo Noid, dude, I love Yo Noid, but it's not like I was a big fan of Domino's Pizza or anything as a kid. I'm 100 billion% sure that is one that my folks bought because it was on sale. There's no parent went to the store and was, listen, we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as I'm sure many of you did, because it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I guarantee you that's why my parents bought me that one. They bought us Bart versus the Space Mutants because of my love of The Simpsons. Super Mario Brothers 3 later because of my love of Mario, right? I get all that. Kirby, we asked for, we got Kirby's Adventure. But games like RC Pro-Am, I never asked for that. I never got into racing as a kid. Yo Noid, I never asked for that. King's, what was it called? It wasn't King's Quest. I think I still have it. King's Knight, I think it's just a horrible fucking game. But I guarantee it was probably on sale. And so my parents scooped it because it was on sale. We had Jack Nicholson Golf. That I'm sure many of you had that one growing up. We never liked golf as kids, but I'm sure it was on sale, so they just wanted to get us a game. And the best part about it was like when you were a kid, it didn't matter, right? And I know any of you that grew up with the NES, like, you know what I'm saying? It didn't. Like, kids today just don't know. They have so many games and all these streaming services and all these subscription services, and they get so many games to play. But like, we didn't have that back then. If you had 4 NES games and 3 of them sucked, you didn't realize that they sucked. It didn't matter. It was a new game to play. Every game was awesome. I don't remember playing an NES game as a kid and being like, this is bad, even though some of them were bad. I just remember being excited that I had my hands on a new NES game. Those are the ones that we had growing up that I played a lot. And believe it or not, I never, as a child, owned a single Mega Man game. I never owned a single Contra game. We didn't own Mario 2. We didn't own Punch-Out. I didn't have Turtles 2 or Turtles 3. I didn't have a lot of the games that have gone on to be Batman, that have gone on to be some of my favorite NES games. And I'm assuming probably because they stayed at full price, they were more expensive, and my folks just didn't have that kind of money. But it didn't matter. And then we got to rent them, and that made them so much sweeter, right? I'm sure some of you know what we're going to get to gaming rental. We've talked about rental games in the past, but nothing compares to renting an NES game for the weekend. Absolutely nothing. The nostalgia I have for this era, like, what a great time. Getting up on a Saturday morning, having a giant bowl of like Frosted Flakes or Fruit Loops or something, and then just playing Nintendo. Watching cartoons or playing fucking NES. Just the best. Christmas morning with a new video game. Just the fucking magical. Renting a game for the weekend? I wish I could bottle that nostalgic feeling up and just sell it because I'd make a fortune. And to this day, I have to say too, back then there was no talk about graphics, frame rates, any of that. It was just like, hey, I got a new game. Do you want to come over and play it with me? And to this day, I still think the good-looking NES games hold up. I love 8-bit graphics. Old 8-bit dad wrote in and said, 8-bit all the way, baby. The NES/Famicom built a strong foundation by pushing the envelope in all genres, allowing the subsequent consoles a shot at fame and relevancy. Respect your elders, kids. Agreed with that. And I love those graphics. To this day, I love the way Mario 3 looks. I love the way The Legend of Zelda looks. Contra, Mega Man, Batman. Even the original Ninja Turtles. I just love 8-bit NES graphics. The music, there's just something about it's just a trip to the past. It's just like when you I don't know if any of you feel like this or if this is just me, but when I watch a movie from the 80s now, the fuzzier quality and the somewhat subpar sound and stuff compared to like today's, I don't think they are subpar. You can tell right away when you're watching a movie, if it was filmed in like the 80s, and there's something about that just makes it better to me. And I don't know if it's just the nostalgia thing or just rose-colored glasses, but like, there's just something, and that's what 8-bit gaming is to me. It's like 80s movies. to a movie buff. They're just special. Subpar Nova said, great system, great games, great Lego set, agreed, and great memories. It wasn't my first system. The Magnavox Odyssey was my first, but it's the system that made me fall in love with video games. People look back at those classic 8-bit graphics and see a bunch of blocky colored pixels, but as a kid growing up, we saw aliens, our favorite cartoon characters, fire-spitting dragons, and all manners of things our imagination filled in. It truly was the golden age of gaming. Well said. I will argue that I think the Super Nintendo Genesis was the absolute golden age of gaming. But that's because to me that just perfected what the NES did. But so many great memories, man. Every fucking sprite was just incredible to look at. My God, I used to play Urban Champion. If you've not played Urban Champion, it was on this 31-in-1 cartridge. My dad, brought us back from Cambodia when he was over there for the military. And it was just 31 ROMs. And it was just a shit, like, Urban Champion is like the most basic, shitty fighting game of all time. It's these two guys that look exactly the same, standing in the street, and I think you could punch high or punch low. And you had to hit the other one 3 or 4 times to knock them backwards, and then you'd walk toward them onto the next screen. And there was like an empty sewer drain behind each of you, like 3 or 4 screens back, and you had to punch your opponent enough times to knock them back into that sewer drain. And the game just looked like shit, played like shit. It was garbage, but I didn't care. I just imagined these two guys fighting in the street, and it just made me want to play them. I get that 100%. And what else is like, it's not just that the games looked awesome with that 8-bit, the old graphics and the music and everything, but like NES Tough. NES Tough is an actual thing, right? Most of you know that. And I love that. I love and it's so funny. I've probably said this on the show 1,000 times. I have no interest in Dark Souls. Modern 3D difficult games usually just make me crazy. But there's something about a broken, cheap, fuck you over, tough 8-bit NES game that just calls to me. I don't know if it's like, because I don't know. I don't know why I like to be hurt like that, but I just do. Games like The Addams Family, TMNT, Batman, Mega Man, Bart versus the Space Mutants, Battletoads. Some of them are good and some of them are bad, but it doesn't matter. They were all tough. NES Tough was a thing, and I think it was done. I truthfully can't decide to this day if I think NES games were tough because game developers were still learning the ropes and that just didn't know any better, or if they were made tough to try to extend the shelf life of a game so that you didn't beat it in an hour and not know what to do with yourself. I want to say it's probably a little bit of both, but I'm leaning more toward the latter. I think it was their way of extending a game's life. We all know that was the case with The Lion King and stuff like that, but I think that goes back to the NES. I don't care. There's no better feeling in gaming than conquering one of those tough, cheap motherfucker games. And I love it. God, I love NES Tough. Lotus wrote in and said, the NES was my first love and I won't hear a bad word about her. That being said, she used to beat me all the time and I'm still mildly fearful of her. Dude, the game rage. This is where Angry Adam originated, was playing NES games. This is where that rage fucking started. I would get so mad. I would throw that controller. I'd probably hit my brother. I'd get in trouble. I'd get grounded off the Nintendo for a day or two, and then I'd come right back and fucking do it again. And over and over and over. And we'll get to that brick of a controller in a minute. But this is where my Angry Adam started, I think, was with the NES Tough games. And I just, what a smile on my, fuck, I love this system. Timmy the Exuberant Turtle said, the NES was a cultural milestone in the 80s. If you didn't have one, you certainly knew someone that did, and you played the hell out of it. I don't think there's anything that builds resilience and patience quite like putting in reps on a brutally difficult game that you blindly rented based on the cover art alone. Agreed. And we'll talk about that in like 2 seconds here, because that's in my notes. I should have put that comment a little bit later. One of the things I used to do as a kid was I knew what size, I did this with Super Nintendo as well, but I knew what size an NES game box was. So on Christmas, if I thought a game was an NES cartridge, or if I thought a present was an NES cartridge, I would put it off to the side and save it to the end. It was like dessert. It was like my final thing. And just those boxes. Oh my God, just the box art. Like I'll never get into collecting NES games in the box just because I don't want to pay that much for cardboard, but I love seeing other people's collections of NES games in the box. They look so good. I can't believe we used to open them and just throw them out. That disgusts me. I can't believe we used to do that. Fucking blasphemy. My God. Picking the game you were going to rent based on the box art is fucking good because we didn't have YouTube to look that shit up, man. That was how you went. You went to the store. And that's why so many bad games were based on popular franchises like Back to the Future, X-Men, Ghostbusters. Some will argue the original Ninja Turtle sucks. I disagree, but whatever. Like so many of those games based on popular movies and franchises, because that's what you do. I rented Ghostbusters so many times as a kid, knowing it sucked, just because I didn't want to accept that it sucked. It was still fun, and it had just that black box with the Ghostbusters logo on it. And I was like, fuck, I have to rent that. It's Ghostbusters. I can't not. Oh my God. And to this day, well, I love looking at people's gaming collections, period. I love looking at game porn. Like just people's game porn. I mean, I don't mind gay porn either, but game porn is just so beautiful to me. I love looking at people's games collections. And while a nice NES boxed collection looks fucking minty crisp on your shelf, I love the way NES cartridges look. If you're watching the video version of this, I have a very small NES collection right there on my shelf I'm pointing at. I love the way those look. More than any system, more than the Super Nintendo, more than anything, I seeing somebody with like a massive multi-hundred cartridge collection of NES games, all just on a shelf where the shelves are all set perfect heights, so they just fit in there just tight. Oh, man. It has me wanting to collect NES games again. I just love the way they look on that shelf. When I was a kid, we had this tiny little, I don't know if it was actually meant for like VHSs or something. We had this tiny little shelf in our basement, and that was what all our NES games were on. And I used to draw that shelf. I know, with the spines of the games that just had the titles in them, I would just draw that shelf and just draw those cartridges and recreate just this, not the actual cover art, just that little spine where it said, Super Mario Brothers or Mega Man. I would draw that. I love the way they look on a shelf. My God. Oh, so many memories. Instruction manuals? Dude. Fuck. I used to take my instruction manuals to school. I would take them on road trips. I would take them everywhere. I'm sure you all did it too. That was the next best thing to playing games, was just reading the instruction manuals over and over and over again. I remember one of my earliest memories. I remember renting Ninja Turtles, the first one, before we owned it. And it came with the instruction manual. It was always a treat, too, when you rented an NES game and it actually came with an instruction manual instead of nothing or that little plastic thing in the inside of the case with like 3 instructions in it. When you actually got the manual, it was fucking wild. And I remember renting the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and sitting down with my Uncle Brian and him going through it with me and us trying to figure out how to beat that game, which is funny. Looking back on it now, I was like, little Adam, your parents could have pulled you out of school and just told you like, hey, if you'll live forever, we'll be billionaires, and you'll cure cancer if you could beat this game. And I wasn't beating this game as a child. But I remember sitting there and reading that instruction manual with my uncle and being like, oh, now I understand. Now I know what to do. And then not knowing what to do. God, I miss instruction manuals. Almost makes me like choke up. I love the NES so much. We had, the 31-in-1 cartridge. That was the other game we had when we were kids. My dad came back from Cambodia with this funky cartridge, 31-in-1. And if you've never seen one of these, most of you probably have. There used to be these odd, the occasional NES cartridge where they were like 2 cartridges. Like, everyone talks about how Sonic and Knuckles was the lock-on technology, but these bootleg cartridges were the original lock-on, and I still to this day don't know how they worked. But that was what we had. We had 31-in-1, and it was like a half-sized NES cartridge that was white, and a half-sized NES cartridge that was gray, and it had a weird ribbon coming out of one side, and you'd put it together, and then you put it in the system, and then this like big title screen would come up with 31, I guess now I know the 31 ROMs on it. And it had like, didn't have a lot of good games. Like I wish it did have like Mega Mans and stuff, but it had like not Super Mario Brothers, but the original arcade Mario Brothers. It had Donkey Kong. It had Circus. Was that what it was just called? Circus? That game sucked, but I used to play it all the time. Popeye, which was awesome. It had Mappy. It had Galaga. That's where I used to play Urban Champion. It had Pinball. It had Muscle, the wrestling game. It had, what was it called? Battle Tanks? I loved that. Did anyone else play that game? I've never seen the cartridge of it anywhere. But it was like you controlled the tank, and you had to kill all the enemy tanks. But there was like bricks and stuff that you could shoot through, and you could use them as cover, or you could shoot through them, and you could shoot straight ahead, and you had to shoot all the enemy tanks. And then behind you, you had like I guess it was like an eagle, because I'm assuming you're like the American Army. and there was like an eagle statue or something, and the other enemy tanks were either trying to destroy your tank or get to that eagle and destroy it, and you had to destroy all them, and you could pick up these upgrade things that would make your tank faster and then bigger and heavier, and then you could shoot through more walls and stuff, and like, I think that was my favorite game in the 3101. We fucking played that all the time. God, I wish I still had it. Fuck me, I wish I still had that 3101. But it was like, it didn't even matter to me that most of the games sucked. It was just so exciting that I was like it blew my little mind. I'm like, you just tripled our game library with 31 extra games. I don't even give a shit that most of them are boring. 31 extra games. My God. Fuck. NES was just a phenomenon, man. It was everywhere. Going to Toys R Us. Does anyone, I don't know. I know some of you have mentioned other stores. There was KB Toys was one. Funkoland? Is that, we didn't have, I don't think we had that here in Canada. I used to get most of my video games at either Toys R Us or Zellers. That was the big place. And does anyone else remember going to Toys R Us and you would see the box and you couldn't even like see the box or hold the box. You'd see the box hanging there. You couldn't even look at the back of the box. You just saw the front cover, and then it had the pieces of paper underneath, and you take the paper up to the counter, and then they get your game out for you. And so that was like, dude, when you saved your Christmas money, saved your birthday money, you finally had enough money to buy a game, and then that was how you had to make a decision. Fucking the stress. The stress, oh my God. I would spend hours. If we went to any store that carried Nintendo, it was like, can I please go look at the video games? And that's where I wanted to go. I'd be so happy to look at those game boxes for hours. Like, I don't even care. Just let me look at the games. Let me look at those boxes. I don't even give a fuck. Makes me so happy, man. It's such a great time. Shawsome1 wrote in and said, oh man, so many fond memories of the NES growing up. I always enjoyed watching my older siblings play Mario 1 and 3, Mega Man, Legend of Zelda, Yo-Noid, Lethal Weapon, and a bunch of other games we had. Watching my mom play Dr. Mario was always entertaining. She even played Commando. It was one of my favorite games to play next to Mario. I love that everyone in my family plays video games. They all made me into the gamer I am today, and I will always cherish that. Shawsome, I used to watch my mom play Dr. Mario as well. We didn't own it. That was one we used to rent. Sometimes when we go to rent games, she would rent one. And she would play it like at night right before we went to bed. And I remember being like my pajamas, like having a snack and watching my mom play Dr. Mario. Or Castlevania was the other one she used to play sometimes. And we didn't own them, but I could watch her just rent them and play them forever. I don't know what it was. It was just, I think it was just like, nowadays I assume a lot of parents play video games with their kids. But back then it wasn't like, a lot of the parents today grew up like me in the 80s and the 90s playing video games, right? A lot of the parents in the 80s, video games didn't exist when they were kids. Maybe Pong. Like, they didn't grow up playing them. So, like, to see my mom, my dad never really touched it, but see my mom play a video game was, like, the coolest fucking thing. I was like, this is something that, like, adults do that I can do, too? Like, what? It was wild. Dr. Wario says, you never forget your first love. Sneaking downstairs late for some more Mario, leaving the system running so you didn't lose your spot in your soccer and hockey games, renting the same game every weekend with the hopes that you will beat it. NES, those were the days. Buddy, I'll get there, because you're right. We used to rent the same games over and over, especially my fucking brother. Bab the Babs said, what I remember most about the NES is going to my local video rental store, staying sometimes for hours to look at the games and being, I already beat this one, tried this one, it sucks, this one looks like crap and such. The NES library was often hit or miss when you rented a bad game. Boy, was the weekend going to be long. I remember a few of my most often rented games were any Mega Man besides number 1, RC Pro-Am, Punch-Out, and Contra. I could play these games forever. Dude, when we lived in Calgary, there was a video rental store in a mall that my mom used to take us to sometimes. And I can see it in my head right now. I would walk in and they had an entire shelf dedicated to Super Mario Brothers 3. That yellow box. And how it worked there was, I'm sure a lot of yours worked the same way. They had the game box on the shelf with that plastic case behind it. And if it didn't have a plastic case behind it, then it was out. And every time we go to rent games, at least until we got our own copy of Mario Brothers 3, which was one of the best days of my life, I would run to that shelf and look for Mario Brothers 3. With my one good eye, just eagle eye blank, trying to see if any of those boxes were sticking out an inch because there was a plastic case behind it. If there was, boom, that was my pick. But when we couldn't get Mario 3, or if they didn't have one, I rented a lot of different games. I would rent anything Mega Man. I would rent Turtles 2 or Turtles 3. I'd rent Contra. I'd rent Ghostbusters so often. Bart versus the World was one I used to rent all the time. The Addams Family was one I used to rent all the time. I rented Fester's Quest a couple of times after I couldn't get the Addams Family and then found out Fester's Quest fucking sucks. My mom would rent Dr. Mario or Castlevania. And my brother, it always felt like he rented the same two games. And it was either Tubin or Bump and Jump. And I don't know if any of you played those two games. Tubin was one of those cool like 10-gen games, the black cartridges. Tubin was this cool auto-scrolling one where you're just a dude in like a black inner tube going down these rivers, and you could whip cans at a 45-degree angle down at the left or the right, and you use those to take out obstacles, and you had to avoid things that would pop your tube. And he used to rent that one a lot, or he would rent Bump and Jump, which I think probably a lot of you know. It was this cool game where you had this car that could bounce way up in the air and then come down. It was a top-down racer, or not racer, but like kind of a racer. You weren't racing anybody. I guess it was almost like an auto-scrolling like shooter, but instead of shooting, your car would jump in the air and then come down on top of enemies and crush them. And we used to rent those, like he would rent those two games over and over. It used to make me so mad because we would go rent a game on Friday and we had them for the weekend. So that was your weekend. You're like, I rented, you know, if we each got to rent a game, say I rented Mega Man 2 and he rented Bump and Jump, that was our weekend. But then it would drive me crazy because Josh would play Bump and Jump for like a little while, and then he would be like, I'm going to play one of the games that we own because he's bored of Bump and Jump. And I would lose my fucking mind. And I was like, dude, we have these games for 48 hours. If you're not going to play it, then let me use the Nintendo. You can have my time this week. Let me play it now while I have Ghostbusters or Mega Man so I can play them while I've rented them, because it was just like, I rented this game. I want to... Fuck, it used to make me wild. Oh my God, it just made me choke. First time I choked on my own rage was when my brother would play a game we owned while we had games that we rented. I used to love renting video games. What else did we used to rent? I remember renting X-Men a few times. I remember renting WrestleMania once. That was the only game I remember renting and being like, no, this just genuinely sucks. I never want to play this again. Fuck WrestleMania. Fuck that game. It's just hot trash. Micro Machines we used to rent. Monster Party we used to rent. Little Nemo, the Dream Master. We rented that a couple of times. Princess Tomato and the Salad Kingdom. Just fuck, man. Good times. God, I love the NES so much. This just makes me want to collect NES games. Like, this is just Blades of Steel. Oh my God. Ice hockey. Fuck. So much fun. The Top Loader wrote in and said, or pardon me, Mike. Pardon me. I was going to talk about the Top Loader. That's not what Michael. That's not who wrote in. Michael Cates wrote in about the Top Loader and said, I just got my hands on an official top loading NES and I got to dust off all the classics. This thing was a masterpiece with so many great games. I still can't fucking beat Bucky O'Hare. You know, I've never played Bucky O'Hare, but I keep hearing it's awesome. I'm gonna have to rent that one eventually. I did not see the top loading NES until probably in high school. I remember, like, I don't know when I first saw it. I didn't even know it was a thing back in the day. But if you've never seen it, look it up. It's fucking wild looking. It's a top-loading console with like it's like an NES controller shaped like an SNES controller. I don't know. I've never really had a big hankering for one. Like, if I ever saw one on the cheap somewhere, I'd probably pick it up. I don't know, do they work better than the classic NES, which we're going to get into in a second, the blowing in the cartridge and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know if they work better or not, but I don't know. I'm just such a traditionalist. It's the same as the Super Nintendo too. I like my OGs. I like the way they look. But the top loader is fucking tight. It looks dope. I'll give it credit. And if it works better, that's interesting. We had a Game Genie. I actually have my Game Genie here right now. That thing changed our lives. I remember flipping through that big white Game Genie code book and looking at codes for games I'd never even heard of. Not just games that I didn't own, but I rented. But games I had never even heard of, and just reading about what the cheat codes would do. I remember sitting there with the games we owned, and sometimes I would go downstairs and I would just spend time entering random codes and just seeing if anything happened, and nothing ever did. But I would just even I could picture that screen with the letters and that weird pixelated pointing hand with the cufflink on his wrist, and like, oh man, my favorite Game Genie memories are setting up TMNT to where it couldn't kill me, so I couldn't take damage. And then I still couldn't beat it because I couldn't find my way through the city level. And Super Mario Brothers 3 there was a code where you could give there was a bunch of codes where you could give yourself various power-ups and you would never lose them. You could still die if you fell through a hole or ran out of time, but when you get hit by an enemy, like if you had a frog suit, if you got hit by an enemy, instead of going back to just being Mario, you would just stay in your frog suit. And I remember doing that once and making myself Frog Mario and thinking it was so cool, and then getting to a fortress in the later half of the game where you had to run and slide under something, and you can't do that as Frog Mario. So I literally couldn't beat the game because there was no way to get underneath this thing, and I couldn't slide, and I was chapped. The Game Genie, man. We had to do a Remember the Game on the Game Genie eventually. So good. That controller, we have to talk about that controller. I am holding, if I can unplug it here. I am holding an official NES controller right now. If you're watching this, oh my God, dude. I know some say they don't love this controller. They say it's not comfortable to hold, and I get it. It's shaped like a brick. The corners are sharp. God help you if you throw this at somebody like my brother and I used to do, because it could do some fucking damage. But this thing is the Twinkie. Silly customer, you cannot hurt the Twinkie. This is the Twinkie of gaming controllers. You could throw this thing off of the Empire State Building and it would not break. These things, it's almost like Nintendo knew. In fact, it's funny because I bet you they didn't know, and if Nintendo could go back in time, they probably would have made these things exponentially more fragile so that when kids had game rage and broke them, they had to buy more, because these things would last forever. 2 buttons. The D-pad, start, select, and then your B and A buttons, and that is it. And to this day, there's no classic controller I enjoy playing games with more than the NES controller. To play Super Mario Brothers with this thing, to play Ninja Turtles with this thing, it just feels right. I love the little indented A and B controllers. I used to draw this controller all the time when I was a kid too. That controller is as timeless as this console is. I love it. I don't want it improved. Honestly, the thing that I am most skeptical of when it comes to the top-loading NES is the redesigned controller. Because I'm like, I like my little brick of pain, as opposed to the Super Nintendo one with the curved edges. I like it. I like that it hurts my hand by the end, you know? I like that. Anyways. And then obviously getting the games work. The system itself, getting your games to work. What a motherfucker. The Supreme Choserizo wrote in and said, don't blow into the fucking cartridges. Growlywog said, I don't give a heck what anyone says. Blowing in the cartridge works, and I will never not do it. I know that is a hard debate amongst gamers. I think it's been pretty definitively proven that blowing in your cartridges doesn't help them work. If anything, it's going to make things worse because you're going to cover the board and like your spit and all that stuff. But of course, that's what you'd put the game in, push it down, push start or push power. And then in an ideal world, it would just fire right up. The game would load up on your screen. Maybe you'd get the blinking power where it would come on and off, and the title screen would start to load, disappear, start to load, disappear. Maybe you'd get it to where it loaded, but it was all fucking pixelated and weird and choppy and blocky, and it wasn't quite working. And then what was the first play? I personally, when I couldn't get a game working, the first thing I would do is hold the reset button for like 5. We'd count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let go. And it almost never worked, but we'd always try that. And then if that didn't work, what'd you go to? You'd fucking turn it off, open the little door. I love that it feels like every NES would like that little creak when you'd open it. Like none of them open. I bet you this one creaks. Yeah, it does too. They all creak when you open them. And then you take the cartridge out and give it the old and maybe blow into the NES like and then slide it back in, try again. And when it finally worked, I've never been a handyman to save my life. I can't fix a car, but I imagine that's how like a mechanic feels when they get a car running. When you get an NES working, you're like, who wants to fucking touch me? When you get a game working. I remember my mom bought us this like cleaning kit, and it had this bottle of solution, and then it had these little pink handles that were like shaped like T's, and the head was flat, and one side had padding on it, and you'd put the cleaning solution, which was probably just rubbing alcohol, on that side, and then you'd rub it up and down the either side of the mother or the board in the game. And then it also had this giant thing that looked like a pink NES cartridge, and you'd put that in it, and then put that into the NES and pull it out, and that was supposed to clean the inside of it. And that was always our go-to. And then as I got older, I realized like just get a Q-tip and a little bit of rubbing alcohol and give it the old. And every time you buy, dude, I buy a new game now or like a used NES game, and that's one of the first things I do. And sometimes that Q-tip comes out of there just black. Like I'm like, I don't know what spawn of hell fucking got stuck on the board of this cartridge, but some of them they clean them and it's fucking disgusting. So, oh man, so many good times. Fuck me. Another trick I've found now as I've gotten older when I try to use my NES is I'll put the game in, push it down, hit power, and then if it doesn't quite work, I'll just jostle the cartridge in there. Because I think that's what you're trying to do is line up the chips. So I just kind of shove the cartridge to the left or the right and just kind of move it, and sometimes that'll get it working. Keith Rolla said, my dad got the NES a few years before I was born in 1990. So many good memories of playing games together as I grew up. We especially loved to play RBI baseball together. He sold his system a couple years ago for space reasons, but now I want to pick one up again. Yeah, I wanted to touch on that as we're kind of getting ready to wrap this up. When I moved out of my mom and dad's house, I bought my own NES and Super Nintendo shortly afterwards because that was when I started to get into collecting. And then I went home and took some of our games. And then I ended up selling my collection years later, and I sold off some of our childhood games. I regret it to this day. It was a horrible mistake. But I've told this story just in case you're new to the community. About a year ago, my brother surprised me with our childhood NES and Super Nintendo and some of our games. Most of the good ones are gone because I took them and sold them, but we have them. I'm looking at my childhood NES right now on my desk, and I can't tell you how much it means to me to have that thing. So if you still have your childhood consoles, even if you're not interested in playing them, unless you need the money, if you need the money, or if you're going to do something cool with the money, like take your family on a vacation or something, then sell them. But if you don't need the money, I'm begging you, do not sell your systems. Just keep them. Because the day might come where you'll be like, and going out and buying a used one somewhere is great, but it's not the same as having your childhood one. I was so stoked. So like now I've got my childhood NES, my childhood Super Nintendo. My brother even gave me this giant box full of instruction manuals that I didn't know he had. A bunch of our old instruction manuals. I have our old Game Genie. It's fucking just means the world to me to have them. I loved that NES. I felt guilty when the Super Nintendo came out. We finally got one because I left the NES behind. And it's funny because when the Nintendo 64 came out, I had a hard time doing that. I would rather play my Super Nintendo than the Nintendo 64. But when the Super Nintendo came out, I jumped all over that. As much as I love my NES, I jumped all over my Super Nintendo because it just felt like an NES on steroids. And I didn't go back. My brother used to play our NES a lot more once we got a Super Nintendo, but I never went back. I was born bred 16-bit Super Mario World. I couldn't go back. But looking back now, while I love both, and I do love both, and I think the Super Nintendo is the greatest console Nintendo's ever made with the possible exception of the Switch, I have more nostalgia for the NES than the Super Nintendo. Ben Drinkin said, hot take, NES is better than SNES. I prefer the simplicity and the controller. Super Nintendo start select buttons stink and the top bumpers broke. I do agree on the start select buttons. I never have problems with my bumpers, but I do agree with the start select buttons. Matt D said, I was never lucky enough to have owned a regular Nintendo, as we called it. Also, shout out to anyone that called it that. The regular Nintendo, the original Nintendo, the normal Nintendo, doesn't matter. That's good shit. Anyone that used to anyone that labeled their Nintendo one of those things is awesome. Matt says, I was never lucky enough to have owned a regular Nintendo, as we called it. My best friend had one and my cousin had one. And you could bet your ass I spent a lot of time at their houses, even though I owned the Super Nintendo. There was something magical about that big, sharp block of a system. I agree. And I think the Super Nintendo is the better console with the better library. There's just something about the NES. It's your first love. You know? It's just... I have more nostalgia for the NES than the Super Nintendo, even though I love the Super Nintendo more. First love, man. Batsy says, a great stepping stone. The NES walked so the Super Nintendo could run. I agree. Dude, agreed. The NES walked so gaming could run. I know video games existed before the NES, but I refuse to hear an argument that the NES isn't the most important video game system ever made. I refuse. It saved gaming. It revitalized gaming. It was the Phoenix Down gaming needed. Brandon DeZeba said, I was 5 when I went to a friend's house and saw an NES for the first time, and we played the Batman game, and I was freaking hooked for life as a gamer. Gaming wouldn't be where it is today without the NES. People need to show the NES more fucking respect. I agree with Brandon. Ocelot of Woe said, my parents had an Atari. I loved it. Space Invaders, Galaga, all the greats. Then I saw a Christmas Sears catalog, and they showed me this thing called a Nintendo, and I saw a screenshot of Super Mario Brothers. I begged my parents for one because of the graphics. Mario looked like a real person. My aunt won a VCR in some drawing at her job, so she exchanged it at a Walmart for an NES. I was 7 at the time, and I've enjoyed gaming ever since. Dude, I would love to do a podcast about VCRs. That takes me back too. That's good shit. VCRs. I mean, I guess we're just about ready to wrap this up. I'm going to get to a few more of your comments and just say goodbye, but the NES's legacy. There's just nothing. I don't think any system in gaming has a bigger legacy than the NES. For those of you that have never seen my office, I have a small shelf. So I'm sitting at my desk right now. This is where I do all my recording. I have a small shelf to the left, and it's got like my PS5, my Series X, my Nintendo Switch, my 64, my GameCube, my Super Nintendo, my classic, like my mini consoles, my modded Xbox, my PS3, my PS2. They're all sitting there on this shelf. My NES, my childhood NES, sits on my desk under my gaming monitor right here beside me. I guess I'm just playing favorites. I like having it right there. I like being able to see it. I like knowing that anytime I want, I can plug in Bart versus the Space Mutants or Ninja Turtles or Mario 3 or Mega Man. And I've started to collect more NES games for it. And I'd like to continue to collect NES games for it. I just utter admiration for this console. It is like The Undertaker is why I'm a wrestling fan, and the NES is why I'm a gaming fan. It's my Undertaker. I love that system. And I think kids today, they probably aren't that interested in playing it because they want to play the Fortnites and the Robloxes and the I do think kids today should play should all play at least a little bit of NES just to respect their heritage. Some of you wrote in about that. Tommy Simps said, I got my dad's old NES when I was old enough to hold a controller, which makes me sound like a little kid, but I'm almost 30. Starting on the NES gave me a great appreciation of the classics that I don't think I would have had today if I started on something like the PS2. I think everyone should play some NES games when they first start gaming, if anything, just for the culture. I've always said, had we ever had children, I would have made my kid play NES. Just a little bit, just to be like, this is where it started. Now you can go play your Fortnites and Robloxes, but you start with that NES. Cryptid K. I hope I'm saying that right. Said the NES and SNES will always be among the best. 8-bit and 16-bit have aged so much better than GameCube era graphics and have a warm nostalgia feel, like throwing a tape in the VCR and hearing it hum. NES should be one of the first that modern kids are introduced to so they can appreciate some of gaming history. Agreed. I love the GameCube. I think it's one of the most underrated systems ever. But I'll hear that argument that some of these games have aged better. That's why I think it's the golden era of gaming. A Super Nintendo game will never not be great. A good Nintendo game will never not be great. Try to play some PS2 games today and it can be kind of hard. Same with GameCube. And Roger Russell is our final comment this week. Roger said, my late dad and I would play together growing up, making trips to Funkoland or flea markets to score games. Fester's Quest, Simon's Quest, Golgo 13, to name a few. Some of the best times of my life and forever missed. Especially when I'm stoned, I love to think back to what life was like in the 80s and 90s. When I had no bills, no job, no responsibilities. My back didn't hurt. My hair was all one color. And it was just my whole purpose in life was finding more time to play video games. And it all started with the NES. I love it so much. Like, it's not just a piece of history to me. It's like a part of my soul, the NES. I can't believe it took 208 episodes to do this. We won't take another 208 to do the Super Nintendo. And while I can't wait to talk about the Super Nintendo, I feel like the Super Nintendo is my like early teen years. NES is my straight up childhood. And there's a difference there. God, I love them. I want to play NES right now. I don't have time. I have to leave for a gig in 2 hours. But I want to play some NES right now. Fuck, I love you, buddy. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Expansion Pass. I hope you all enjoyed this look back at the legendary Nintendo Entertainment System. If I didn't read your comment, I'm sorry. There were not hundreds, but 100 of them or so. I loved reading them. I loved hearing all your stories. It's so wild to me that so many of us grew up in different parts of this world, but all had similar experiences growing up with this little gray box. And it's what brings us together today. It's the glue that holds the retro gaming community together is the NES. I'm going to log off here, get this thing edited and uploaded before I leave for my show. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Thank you for the support. And we'll do it again next week. All right? Take it easy, everybody. Talk to you on the next one. Cheers so long. Goodbye. Thanks again for listening. Head over to patreon.com/rememberthegame to see all of our bonus podcasts waiting for you over in our ad-free Patreon archives. You can view them all on Spotify as well. Our Patreon subscriptions start at just $3 a month. It's like 75 cents a week. We offer annual subscriptions that'll save you your 12th month's fees. We donate 5% of our Patreon income to Extra Life for the Stollery Children's Hospital here in episode. And most importantly, you get hundreds of extra podcasts with up to 4 new freebies well, they're not free. They're ad-free. You got to pay for them on Patreon. That's false advertising. Oh boy, here come the lawyers. No, $3 a month. 4 new podcasts. Well, okay. All right. Now I'm really fucking this up, okay? For $3 a month, you get 2 additional shows every week. For $5 a month, you get 4 extra shows every week. This is the worst sales pitch of all time. Regardless, you sign up for $3, you get hundreds of ad-free podcasts, and then much more coming, and then you can decide what you want to do from there, all right? You also can join our Discord, which is over 1,000 people. It's pretty active. It's pretty nice. It's a fun place to be. You can write into the show. You get to help pick the games we cover and so much more. Patreon.com/RememberTheGame. We'll be back next week with another episode of Remember the Game. I'm hoping it's X-Men Legends, but we need to make sure I can get all these stars aligned in the next 7 days. But that's what I'm aiming for, okay? Thanks again, everybody. I'm out of here. Thanks, cheers, so long, goodbye, whatever.